So last class we were discussing about data pump, and we understood that data pump is an extension to normal export import, and it is having so many features. And we are looking at all the options of export EXPDP, and we stopped at the point where we are looking at the version parameters. So normally, when you look at the traditional export import, it is having, or the mechanism of export import is something like it is always forward compatible. That means you can take export of a 9A database and you can import into 10G or 11G, but you cannot take export of a 10G database and you cannot import into 9A or 8A or any other version. That means always you can take export from lower versions and you can import them into higher versions. That is always possible, but taking export from a higher version and importing into lower version is not possible in normal export import. But with the help of this version parameter in data pump, we have the flexibility that you can take export of a 11G database and you can import into 10G database. But still you cannot do from 10G to 9i. Why? Because 9i database doesn't contain data pump feature. So we already read that point. Data pump was newly introduced in 10G. So you can take export of a 11G database and you can import into 9i. So let me show you the syntax on how we can do that. So I hope everybody remember what is meant by directory. So we are going to specify something like this: version equals to 10.2.0.1. So in which case what happens is the dump file which is getting created. For example, here in this example we have the dump file name as ABC. So this dump file is getting created with the version which is compatible to 10G. So when you want a export to be taken from a 11G database and you want to import into a 10G database, then this is the way how you need to issue EXPDP command. So this is one advantage that we have, and even now because 12C got released, you can take export from a 12C database and you can import into 11G, or you can take export of 12C and you can import into 10G also. So that is the advantage of version parameter. And then when we have some other options like add file. So suppose if you feel that the current usually the export will be taken into only one dump file, but if you wish to take into two dump files, you can add one more dump file to the existing export process with the help of this add underscore file command. And we have another option called continue client. So it's something like you can pause your export job and you can continue it at later point of time. And then exit client, it is just to stop the export process and it is going to quit the session. And then we have kill job. So if you want to stop the export job, then you can use this particular clause, kill job. And already we understood about parallel option, so that we will be having multiple processes which will be taking the export. So suppose you started your export job with a parallel of 4 and then you want to increase the number of parallel processes to 8, then always you have the option of increasing parallel value. And then the main advantage of EXPDP is when we talk about EXP, once you start your export process, you cannot stop in between. But when you come to EXPDP, you can pause the job in between and later you can resume the job also. So that is one advantage we have with start job. And then we have another option, stop job. So stop job is to either stop completely or to pause the job, and start job is to start from the point where it has been stopped. So it's like pausing and resuming the export process. So this is one advantage that we have with the EXPDP. And we also understood about how the export is going to work. So this is the way how export is going to work. The data from different tables is being transferred into a master table, and from master table the data will be copied to a dump file. And import or IMPDP will be a reverse process. From the dump file, the data will be first copied to master table, and from master table the data will be copied to the corresponding tables. So this is how EXPDP and IMPDP will work. So let us take export from one database and let us do import into another database. So we will see that options. So I am going to show you at schema level and all. So I am creating one user in one database. Just I am creating dummy table. So what I will be doing first is I will take the export of this particular user. And just creating the directory. So I'm just verifying what are all the directories available, and I'm creating one directory on my own by the name dpdir. First I am creating the directory at OS level, then I am creating at SQL level. Okay, so then I am taking EXPDP directory dump file. I am naming it as kanna.dmt. So export got completed. Now I am going to transfer this file to another server. So I have another server where a database by the name devdb is existing. So I am just transferring this to this server. I say scp dump file to other server in some location. For example, let me check here what are all available. Okay, so here under U01 I have dpdir. I'm just creating all that. So the file got copied. Now I need to import it. But well, we already know the process. So well, before importing, first we need to create the user. So I am creating a user, for example, tech, identified by tech. And also I am creating one directory with a similar name. So now, so if you look at, this is my dump file. So I'm just going to import it with the help of impdp command. And here, just to avoid confusion, I am using in both the servers, I am using the directory name as dpdar, but it is not mandatory. In one server, if you have dpdar, in another server, you can use a different name. So it is not mandatory. So if you remember in IMP, if you are importing one data from one schema to another schema, we use it to use from user and to user. But instead of from user and to user, Oracle gives us one option here, that is remap schema. So what you need to do is remap schema, then you need to mention your source user, that is Kannan, colon your destination user, in my case it is tech. So we need to just specify like that and proceed with import. So you can see import got successful, but it is saying one error. Error is ignorable. So the error says is object type user tech is already existing. So no issues, because user is already existing, it is going to throw you that particular error. So similar way, you can make use of import of a table, and you can do import of some specific set of rows using query options. So all those commands are already mentioned in the class notes. So any queries before we start with the next topic? Yeah, add file parameter, as I told you, for example, when we are taking export here, normally we will mention only one dump file name. But if you want to add one more dump file, let's say export process has already started and you want to, import it, sorry, you want to add one more dump file, in that case we will be using that parameter add underscore file. So for example, let me show you that how we do this. So here I am starting one export process. So one dump file will be created because I specified only one. Now if I want to add one more dump file, then what I can do is I can say expdp attach equals to the job name, and here I can say add underscore file with some other name, full one dot dmp. So so So, I mean, we would be specifying like this, add file, and then we need to provide the dump file name in double quotes. So that's basically going to add one more dump file, but usually we don't use that in real time. So that is the purpose of add file. And yes, Sanjay, data pump is a regular process because nowadays you will not be able to see 9i databases. So almost every project you will be having 10G or 11G versions. So that is the reason data pump is mandatory. But in some cases or in some projects, still maybe the version is 10G or 11G, but still people are following export import process. So that's the reason you need to have hands-on both export import as well as data pump also. So anybody is having any other questions? Yes, both EXP, both export import and data pump are regular process. As I said earlier, you will be using at least twice in a week, twice or thrice in a week. Okay, so let us start with the next topic, that is backup and recoveries. So backup, the definition of a backup already. So backup is nothing but a duplicate copy of the original data. And why would be requiring backup? In case if at all the original data is lost, at least you will be having backup in order to recover the data. So similar way, for our databases also we will be taking the backup, and backup original usually has been divided into two types. One we call it as cold backup, and the other one we call it as hot backup. So first let us discuss about cold backup, then we will move on to the hot backup things. So the first point is going to talk about the definition of backup and why we require backup and all. And the second point says, if the data is reproducible and the backup is not existing, still we can recover the data, but it is a tedious and time consuming task. So for example, you know that bank deposits earlier, when online banking etc. is not there, then you know how the bank deposit or cash withdrawals used to be done. So it needs to be done through paperwork. So that means if a transaction is lost, even still that piece of paper will be available. From that you can recover the data. So data is usually divided into two types. One we call it as reproducible data, and second one we call it as non-reproducible data. So reproducible data in the sense, even if you lost the original data and you don't have a backup, with the help of physical files you can able to reproduce it. So for those kind of activities, or for those kind of reproducible data, even though you don't have a backup, still you can recover it, but it will be a time consuming task. So that is the reason backup for every database is a must. And the third point specifies taking the backup after shutting down the database is called as cold backup. So why we call it as cold backup? Because we are taking the backup when no user connected to the database. That means we are going to shut down the database first. And when you shut down the database and you take the backup, because no user will be connecting and performing the transactions, whatever the backup you are going to take will be a consistent backup. And when comes to real time, we will never perform cold backup. Almost you can say 0%. Why? Because if you want to shut down the database, that will be having an impact on the application also. So suppose your database is supporting some website. So if you shut down your database, that website will not work. So that's the reason taking cold backup in real time is very rare case. So but still for knowledge purpose and all, we need to go through it. And below you have the steps on how to take a cold backup. So let us go and look into that. Now before starting with the steps, one important point we need to remember is, when we want to take a backup for database, what are all the files that we need to include? So can anybody specify what files we require in order to take the backup? Or when I say backup of the database, what are all the files that I need to take? Yes, we need to take control files, then data files, redo logs, agreed. Any other files apart from these three? DB dumps in the sense you mean to say export backup funny? Export is not a backup exactly. Export is a utility to transfer the data, that's it. So we cannot exactly call it as a backup. So apart from control, redo and data files. Okay, archives. Okay, archives to some extent I do agree that. Okay, temp files, yes. Whenever I say data files, it includes temp file also. Yes, the main important thing is P file or SP file. So whenever you want to take a backup, the first thing, or the preferred thing that you need to concentrate is P file or SP file. So along with your data files, control files, redo log files, archives, etc., you need to take the backup of P file or SP file also. That is very much mandatory. So let us go through the steps on how to take the cold backup. So whatever the steps you have in class notes, I am following same. So first we are going to take the information about data files. So like we are going to just take the location and the file names, and then we are going to take the information of control files. Then we are going to take the information of redo log files. So basically with the help of these three queries, you are going to identify what are all the locations and file names of data files, control files and redo log files. So once you do that, as a next step, I am going to create one directory by the name cold BKP. So in U02 I am creating one directory by the name cold BKP. Then as we discussed, cold backup is nothing but the backup which you are taking after shutting down the database. So I am going to shut down the database first. So then I am starting my files copy. So first I am copying data files to the backup location, that is U02 cold BKP. Then we will be taking backup of control files. So and now because we are shutting down the database and we are taking the backup, during cold backup we don't require to take archives backup or archaeologs backup, because whenever you shut down the database with the shut immediate command, whatever the dirty blocks that were there in the write list, those will be returned permanently to the data files. That means every data or almost 100% of your data is available in your data files itself. So when complete data is available in the data files, you don't require to take backup of archives again. So that is the reason in cold backup we will never take the backup of archives. So as a next step, after completing these three files, we are going to take the backup of SP file or P file. So the locations are standard as we know already, Oracle home/dbs. So I am copying all the .data files. So this is what we are going to do, and as a final step we are going to first start up the database. And as a final step we are going to execute one command. So alter database backup control file to trace. So what is the purpose of executing this alter command? We will be seeing it at a later point of time. So there is a significance in executing this particular step. So we will see that later. So the same steps are there in your class notes also. So and the last note is going to say the same. Archives are not required whenever you want to take the backup with cold backup. So this is how we are going to take the cold backup, and let us go and look into hot backup. So cold backup means we are taking the backup after shutting down the database, whereas hot backup means we are taking the backup when the database is up and running. So that means you don't require any downtime. So even when your database is up and running 24/7 at any moment of time, you can take the hot backup. So this is the advantage of hot backup, and there is some theory part involved, but before starting with theory part, let us go and look into the steps on how to go with hot backup. So if you look at the steps, initially we have the steps on how to take backup for a 9A database, and next you have steps on how to take hot backup for 10G database. So there is a difference between these steps. So let me show you that. So first we are going to start with the data file information, then control file. But in hot backup, we will not take the backup of redo log files. So this is one more, just like how we will not take backup of archives in cold backup, in hot backup, we will not take the backup of redo log files. Instead, we will be taking the backup of archives itself. And you know already, archives are nothing but a copy of or a backup of redo log files. So even if you take redos or archives, it doesn't matter. Both are one and same. So that is the reason in hot backup we will not take redos backup. So we are going to take only these two information. So I am showing you 9 steps on how we will be doing that. Then at OS level I am creating one directory by the name hotbkp, and what we use it to do in 9i is alter table space name begin backup. So we are going to execute one command, alter table space name begin backup. So this command is going to tell to Oracle that DBA is going to start taking the backup of my database. So because whenever you are taking the backup of the database when it is up and running, Oracle should know that the backup is going on in the background. So that is the reason we are going to tell Oracle that we are starting the backup with the help of this particular command. Okay, so now you can see there is a error which says it cannot start online backup, and the reason is media recovery is not enabled. So what is meant by this? It means that archive log mode is not enabled on this database. So one important thing is whenever you want to take hot backup, you need to have archive log mode enabled. For cold backup it is not required, but for hot backup it is mandatory. So what I am doing, I am just enabling archive log mode, and you know the steps already on how to do that. So now you can see archive log mode is enabled. So we need to say begin backup. So first we need to run that command, begin backup command, and then copy the file to the backup location. So once the file is copied, then we need to say alter table space name and backup. Then again we need to start for the next table space, alter table space name. Next one is undo. Then we say undo begin backup. Then again we need to run this cp command. And again we need to say undo and backup. So like this we need to repeat the steps for all the table spaces. So if you have 10 or 15 table spaces, this might be easy, but when you have 80 table spaces, 100 table spaces or 200 table spaces, obviously this step following these steps would be a difficult process or time taking process. So that is the reason from 10G onwards, Oracle has introduced a very simple command, that is alter database begin backup. So instead of placing each and every table space into begin backup mode, from 10G onwards you have the option that you can go and place entire database into begin backup mode. And now what you can do is you can just simply copy all the files to the backup location. And once you are done, you can say alter database and backup. So this is the difference between 9A and 10G. Then you need to take the backup of control files. So that begin backup and end backup is only for data files, not for any other files. Then you need to copy the archives. So my archive destination is this one, U01 flash recovery area, etc. So I am going to copy that. So I have just copied that to U02. So there would be a directory. So let me do a recursive copy. Okay. So once it is done, then we need to copy the P file or SP file, whatever my database is using. Okay. So then as a final step, once again we are going to run this command. So these are the steps that we will be performing. So that is what it is. And the note says in any version during hot backup we will not take the backup of redo log files, because as I said, we are taking the backup of archives, we don't require to take the backup of redo log files. So anyone is having questions? Okay, so let us go into the theory part of hot backup. So cold backup, as we discussed, we are shutting down the database and then we are taking the backup, so it will be consistent. But hot backup is not like that. Because the database is up and running and the users are connected and users are doing some transactions, at the same time if you are taking the backup, may not be all the data will be there in the backup. So for example, let's say you started taking the backup of database at 10 o'clock and the backup is going on at 10 o'clock 5 minutes, one user connected and doing some update, then whatever that user is updating, that may be there in the backup or may not be there in the backup. So in such cases, it might happen that the backup will be leading to an inconsistent backup. So that is the reason normally we say cold backup is a consistent backup and hot backup is an inconsistent backup. And one thing what we need to understand here is what happens exactly when we place that in begin backup mode. So just now we ran one command, begin backup. So what exactly happens when we ran that command internally? So we need to understand that. So I'm just trying to explain that here. For example, this is the data file and assume this is the header portion and this is the body portion. So whenever you place the entire table space or the database into begin backup mode, what Oracle will do is Oracle will make the header portion freeze. So if this is the data file header portion, whatever is there, so that header portion will become or will be freezed. That means normally what will be there in the header? Header contains the latest SCN, or data file header will also contain the bitmap block, all those things. So by the moment you place in begin backup mode, whatever the SCN number is recorded, that SCN number or the updation of SCN number will stop over there. For example, by the time I issue begin backup, the SCN number is 1234. Then what happens is the SCN will stop at this number only. It will not carry forward. So because the header is getting freezed, but the body of the data file is still active. So whatever the place I have put a tick mark, that body portion will be still active. That means DB writer can still write the dirty blocks into the data file body portion. So these are the two actions that will happen whenever you place into begin backup mode, and that is what point 234 is stating about. So point 2 says during hot backup, database will be in fuzzy state and still users can perform the transactions, which makes the backup inconsistent. And third point says whenever we place a tablespace or database in begin backup mode, the following actions will happen. The first action is the corresponding data file's header will be freezed, and that is CKPT process will not update the latest SCN. And point B says body of the data file is still active. That means DB writer can still write the dirty blocks to the data files. And when this freezing, unfreeze and all will be done, when we say end backup. So that is what fourth point says. After we say end backup, the data file header will be unfreezed, and the CKPT process will update the latest SCN immediately by taking the information from the control files. So this is what basically will happen whenever you place into begin backup mode. So any queries over here? No, Sanjay. After we say end backup, whatever we will be taking the backup, that itself will be the backup. So otherwise, it will be a never-ending process. For example, let's say we started backup at 10 o'clock, and one user started its transaction at 10:15, let's say. So then the transaction is still going on, and let's say at 10:30 we set end backup. Then once again, if Oracle starts taking the updated files, then maybe another user again will start one more transaction. That means this will be getting into a loop. Every time this will never complete basically. So that means whatever the things you are taking the backup, that will be there in the backup only. Any modifications that are happening during backup will go to archive log files. And that is the reason we are taking archive logs in hot backup. So any more queries from anyone? Okay, so apart from this part, so basically hot backup is having some disadvantages. So we need to understand about those disadvantages here. So the first disadvantage is already we talked about, that is inconsistency, because the database is up and running, and when taking the backup, users can able to connect and do the transactions. The backup whatever you are taking will be an inconsistent backup. So that is the first disadvantage of hot backup. And the second disadvantage is, whenever you are taking the backup, more redo entries will be generated. For example, you are taking a backup and one user issued an update statement, then whatever normally, let's say, without backup, one update statement is generating some 100 MB of redo entries, and when you do the same update statement during hot backup, then that may generate 400 MB of redo entries or 500 MB of redo entries. So what you will be observing is more and more redo entries will be generated. So there is a reason for that. So the reason is, uh, for example, this is a Oracle block, and as I said earlier, whenever you place into begin backup, only the header portion will be freezed, but not the body portion. That means still DB writer can write into this particular block. So for example, let's say DB writer is writing into that particular block, and at the same time Oracle is also at the same time OS is copying this block into backup location. So let's say OS has copied half of the block. So let's say it copied half of the block, and meanwhile the rest of the half, wherever I am drawing the lines, so assume that rest of the half of the block was updated by DB writer. Then what happens is, when this block was copied by OS, then the first portion of the block will be having the normal data, and second portion will be having the updated data, because by the time second portion was read or second half was read, DB writer updated that block. So what happens is, in the same block, half portion will be having old data and half portion will be having new data. And whenever you have a block with this kind of activity, we call those blocks as fractured blocks. So if any block is having mismatched data, then we call those kind of blocks as fractured blocks. And whenever fractured blocks are there, Oracle could not able to recognize those fractured blocks, and Oracle could not able to actually recover those fractured blocks. That is the reason what Oracle will do normally is, suppose you have a data file and the header portion is freezed already, and there is a block DB writer is about to write into this. Then before DB writer writes into it, Oracle will copy this entire block as redo entry. So that means 8 KB is the standard block size, we know that. So whatever 8 KB of block is there, that entire 8 KB will be copied to the redo entries or the redo log files. So after copying this block, then Oracle will allow DB writer to write it. So for example, DB writer has written half and all, and CP process has copied the block, and now you have the same situation. Let's say half of the data is old and half of the data is new. Now in this kind of situation, what Oracle can do is, Oracle can remove this particular block, and if want, Oracle can replace this fresh block completely. So that means before DB writer making any changes to the block, Oracle is basically taking the backup of the block, and that too it is placing in a redo log files. So normally redo log file size will be, redo entry size will be very less. It will be in 0.001 KB or something like that. But here, because you are copying entire block as redo entry, it will be 8 KB. So that means there will be more block size. That means the redo entry size will be increased, and by which automatically the much more and more redo entries will be generated, and more and more archives will be generated basically. So there are two disadvantages for hot backup. The first one is inconsistent backup, and second one is more redo entries will be generated. And why more redo entries will be generated? Because Oracle will copy the entire data block as a redo entry. And why it will copy the entire data block as redo entry? In order to avoid fractured blocks. And what is a fractured block? Any block which is having mismatched data is called as a fractured block. So this is what basically the disadvantages of hot backup. And let me show you this practically how it can be done. So okay, so now see, there are no archives generated. I am connecting to database first. So first I am verifying whether archelog mode is enabled or not. Yes, it is enabled. Now what I am doing here is create table. Okay. So now the total count of rows is 1,14,688. Okay. Now if you look at the number of archives that are generated, please do not find this. Maybe generating incorrectly. Save auto database archelog open. So why it is not generating archives? Let me try more and more rows. Okay. So now you can see one archelog got generated. and the total row count now is 9,17,504. So that means by the time I reach this 9,17,000, only one archeolog got generated here. Okay, so now what I do is I am going to drop this table, then I place my database in begin backup mode, then I will do the similar exercise. So what I do is first I am going to create the table, then I am inserting the rows. So I will insert till I get the count, 9 lakh count. So now I set commit, and if you look at the row count, it is same as earlier. Okay, only one actor generated. Somewhere there is a issue. But actually, okay, let me try in another database. Okay, so now here I don't have Karma user. I have another user, and in that I am creating this table. So you can see two files got generated. So without you know begin backup mode. Now what I do is I will enable begin backup mode, and similarly I will create tables. So I will create T3 table here. So earlier I stopped at 9,70,504. So now also I am stopping here. And if I look at number of archives, you can see 3 archives got generated. Earlier for the same activity only 2 archives got generated, but when I do the same activity in begin backup mode, then 3 archives got generated. That means an extra archive got generated, and the reason is because of this begin backup mode. So that is how, this is one disadvantage we consider it as. So that is all about these points 5, 6, 7 and talks about. So once again I am repeating that there are 2 disadvantages for hard backup. The first one is inconsistency, and number 2, more redo will be generated. Why more redo will be generated? Because Oracle will copy entire data block as redo entry. Why Oracle will copy entire data block as redo entry? It is to avoid fractured blocks. And what is a fractured block? Any block which is having mismatched data is called as fractured block. So is these points clear? So anybody is having any queries? We don't have any solution for this, unfortunately. Even though this is a disadvantage, we need to continue with that. I mean, hard backup doesn't provide us with any solution for that. After hot backup, the data will be, some part of the data will be there in data files, and the rest of the portion will be there in the archives. Because as I said, when some user is doing some transaction, that complete data may not come into data files. So what Oracle will do is, till that time whatever the data is available, it will push that to the data files. The rest of the updated data it will push into archive logs in the form of redo entries. And when it comes to the usage of these backups in real time, in general we don't use cold backup, as I said earlier. Even now we are from past 2 to 3 years we stopped using hot backup, because Oracle is having one more backup methodology or backup utility that is called as Harman. So which is quite famous and which is having many advantages also. So that is the reason even using hot backup in real time nowadays is very less case. So almost I can say 99% it's not there. So then we have a question after hot backup. Yeah, after hot backup, if checkpoint occurs, then yes, a complete data will be there in the files. But what I said is during hot backup. Any more questions from anyone? Okay, so tomorrow we will continue with database recovery and Harman topics. So have a nice time till then and good night.